Tell me, my queen mother, the story of the gods. Do you never tire, son, of those ancient legends? But no, let this not seem a reproof. It is well that a prince of the royal line should ponder much on those mighty ones, who came from the sun, where dwells Elegai, the source of all, to create a fair world, the world in which someday you will reign. Shall I speak then of Solon Goling, patron of husbandry and lord of the north? Or would you hear of the gentle Mahabharastro, sweet goddess who fashions the dreams of childhood? Or would you know of the mysterious Narama, who died twice, lived thrice, and was both male and female by turns? Tell me of them all, but first, mother, who was the mightiest of the gods? Hush, child. Among beings so exalted it would be presumptuous for mortals to regard one above the other. But know this, for it concerns you and your pride of race. Splendid legends relate to the strength and virtues of Maharalan, Lord of the South, sometimes called the Life-Giver, for it was he who created Nirama from a rock by the sea, and breathed his own life into her nostrils. But, mother, was he not defeated in battle? It was a battle beyond our understanding of forces that we cannot comprehend, and for a purpose beyond our knowledge, though it is said that in some manner the strife arose over the sex to be awarded the newly created Nirama. Maharlan would have endowed the partly formed being with the attributes of a god, but Barduchan, Lord of the West, contended for a goddess. In their mighty clash of wills, the heavens were rent with lightning, the seas were churned, mountains were heaved by the all-powerful ones across the land. Legend has it that a single moon shone from the heavens before that event, but a lightning bolt hurled by Maharalan at his antagonist failed of its mark. It smote the moon by chance, splitting the heavenly body in twain, so that 2 moons now circle the continents of north. Then Barduchan, who defeated Maharlan, was the mightiest. Nay, that you must not say. True, at the end of 3 days, Maharlan acknowledged himself defeated. Yet it is written that he nobly abandoned the fray out of pity for the helpless creatures of north, and for the newly created Nirama, knowing that if the battle continued, they would all be destroyed. And so, Nirama became a goddess, and in that aspect she is depicted by our sculptors as a mighty huntress, running with upraised spear, cheek by cheek with Barduchan. But Maharlan, the life-giver, could not wholly undo his original design, so that at times she reverted to the form of a male. That is why, in ancient carvings, we sometimes find Nirama pictured as a god, carrying lightnings of destruction in his clenched hand. Then, after all, Maharlan was the greatest. He was a mighty being, son. Yet how can any be considered greater than Pyrrol? The rain came down in sheets, drenching everything in sight. Dave Marlin, soaked clear through to his bones, trudged on through mud and darkness. He slipped, cursed, and stumbled, blaming the storm, the road, even the truck driver who had left him stranded on this forsaken mountain trail. What had pulled him off the main highway was a blinking light he'd spotted earlier through the rain. Now that light was gone, but stubborn as ever, Dave pushed forward. Anything had to be better than standing still. Then, out of the gloom, he caught the silhouette of an old roadster. Someone was hammering under its hood, swearing at the stubborn machine. Dave called out, half joking, half desperate, but the mechanic wasn't in the mood for laughs. The car had no lights, the battery was dead, and the man wanted him gone. As Dave fumbled around near the seat, his hand brushed against something unexpected. A woman. Her voice snapped at him to get his hands off, and when she jerked upright, he realized her wrists were shackled in handcuffs. A chained prisoner. Before he could press for answers, the man turned on him with a gun. But Dave was quicker. In a slick, muddy brawl, he disarmed the stranger and came up holding the weapon. Only then did the truth spill out. The armed man was a detective named Len Magruder, and the woman Sally Camino was his prisoner, wanted for running a con game. Magruder claimed he was saving the state money by hauling her back without the red tape of extradition papers. Dave didn't buy it, not completely. Something smelled off. He forced Magruder to remove the cuffs, and, with Sally now walking free, the 3 of them set off together up the miserable, rain-soaked trail. Sally ditched her high heels in the mud and marched barefoot, tossing barbs at both men. Dave, half amused and half intrigued, couldn't help noticing she was tougher and sharper than she first looked. The road climbed endlessly upward, every step heavier than the last. Magruder grumbled that they should have stayed in the car. Dave only mocked him, relishing the chance to prove he could endure more than either of his companions. Sally, dripping wet, snapped back with her own sarcasm, never letting either man get the upper hand in the banter. And then, after the long, punishing climb, they crested a ridge. There it was, unexpected shelter waiting in the storm. Through the storm and up the mountain, the three travelers finally spotted a faint glow in the cliffside. It wasn't just a cave, it was a house built right into the rock. Inside, by a dying fire, an old man with a flowing beard sat nodding over a book. A kerosene lamp flickered beside him. When they knocked, he opened the door, squinting through the rain. Oddly, he seemed to be expecting them. "Where's the other?" he asked, as if he had been waiting for someone else. Confused but grateful for shelter, Marlin and the others stepped inside. He stoked the fire, warming the room for Sally and Magruder, though he felt uneasy under the host's heavy stare. Then came a shock. From a half-open door at the back, faces appeared, strange, rough faces. 3 of them looked hard and crooked. One was strikingly beautiful, a young girl with golden hair and an almost angelic aura. The bearded Manilius Thornbolt reluctantly waved them in. The newcomers were a ragtag bunch. A scarred woman in a filthy robe, Ma Barstow, sneered at them. A wiry, greasy-haired man introduced himself as Percival B. Link, known on the street as Slinky Link. His buddy was Bart Duchesne, a hulking ex-con with the kind of cold eyes that promised violence. And then there was Pearl, the golden-haired girl, whose beauty clashed with the grime and menace around her. Introductions quickly turned sharp. Magruder tried to flash his authority, but Link called him out, said he knew him as a disgraced ex-cop, kicked off the force for hijacking. Sally exploded at Magruder, realizing he wasn't any kind of detective but a crook running his own game. The whole thing blew apart right there. Masks came off, alliances shifted, and Marlin knew he was in deeper trouble than he'd thought. Meanwhile, Thornbolt the old man launched into a strange tirade. He admitted freely that he was crazy, but also brilliant. He raved about spaceships, monstrosities, and wasted genius, declaring that at least he was honest about his madness and the criminals surrounding him. His outburst rattled the room, but the others were used to it. Link quietly nudged Marlin. Best to get out of here before the old man winds up all night. They were led through a tunnel carved into the rock, with a plank walkway stretching nearly 100 feet. The air smelled of earth and old mines. Finally, they emerged on a ledge high on the mountainside. The rain still poured, but towering pines framed the rim of what Bart Duchesne revealed was an ancient crater. He hinted at something strange hidden down in the pit below, promising that tomorrow they'd see it for themselves. The group was herded into rough bunkhouses along the ledge, men to one shack, women to another. Inside, the place had already been prepared with bunks. Magruder noticed it right away. It felt too neat, too ready, as if someone had been expecting them all along. Duchesne only chuckled darkly. "You'd be surprised," he said. And with that, the uneasy night began, leaving Marlin, Sally, and Magruder to wonder just what kind of trap they'd walked into. Dawn breaks cold on the crater rim. Dave Marlin hugs himself against the bite of morning air and stares into the basin below, where a mud-colored sphere squats like a giant clay planet. Bart Duchesne strolls up, amused by Dave's question. "Yeah, it looks like clay, but there's scaffolding, bunkhouses, and one mad scientist to go with it. That planet is Eli Thornbolt's disgraced dream, a metal spaceship that slid off its rig, dropped into this terry pit, and started doing something nobody can quite explain." As they talk, Duchesne drops his mask. He's educated, a cynic with a rap sheet, crystal-gazing hustles, a manslaughter charge from a bar fight. He clocks the same in Dave, a tough guy with brains, a past, and a voice that doesn't match the cauliflower ear. Then Duchesne mentions the strangest thing of all, Pearl's prophecy. 8 will gather here for men. For women, then something big happens. They've already got 7. One more woman, and the set is complete. Breakfast pulls the misfits together. Sally newly put together, but still edged like a razor. Magruder, all bull neck and bad faith. Ma Barstow, scarred and sentimental, glued to Pearl. Slinky Link, a greasy opportunist. Duchesne, the self-aware sinner. And Eli, the bearded storm cloud at the head of the table, shoveling down food and loathing everyone. When he's done, Eli stalks out to brood over his planet, muttering, "Still it moves." Down on the scaffolding, Duchang shows Dave what moves means. The sphere sits in a bed of black ooze that softens in the sun and hardens in the cool, breathing the thing into a slow rotation. The outer crust is rock hard, but drive a bar through and the inside gives rubbery alive with that same self-sealing muck. Birds, mice, even livestock get lured in by the smell or the seeds stuck to the surface. Once the timing's right, the pit eats them. Eli shows up fired with purpose pick shovel. Orders Dave and the old man smash through crust. The hole heals behind them like a wound. Slinky half full, half useful suggests a pipe. They muscle a heavy drain tube into the gap and screw it inward, inch by grinding inch. By day's end, the pipe's 2 feet in. By the next afternoon, 4.5 until they hit something solid. The shell. Dave hopes. Eli barks for a blowtorch. Link slithers in and burns a clean ring, melted like butter. Meanwhile, everyone's hauling Eli's life into the sphere books, boxes, food, instruments. Sally goes barefoot, practical and daring. Eli insists on going first. They shove his bulk through the pipe, fabric ripping, curses flying, then a wet plop as he lands inside. The crew trims the jagged metal and starts feeding crates into the dark belly of the thing. Gunfire snaps the moment in half. Down the slope, a sheriff's posse fans out on the hillside, squeezing a single overalled fugitive, the Picaroon kid from Rock to Rock. Sympathy for the underdog kicks in. Sally cracks the door and whistles him in. He dives through a hail of bullets, sprawls across the threshold, bleeding from the neck and side. Dave drags him in as Sally throws the bolt. "Open up, law." Sheriff Bates hammers at the door. Dave buys seconds with questions and clumsy locks, but the door has to open. The posse pours through, follows a bright trail of blood into the tunnel, then out onto the ledge right to the sphere, where the kid smeared his way down the pipe. No one wants to stick a head into that perfect shooting lane. So Betts orders Dave to crawl in and talk sense. With helpful shoves from behind, Dave slides into the dark and lands on a tilted wooden catwalk inside. It's a maze of platforms at an angle. A hollow world humming with old ambition. Duchane's hands guide him. "We're boxed," Dave whispers. "Give up the outlaw, or they'll gas us." Magruder sneers that this is Sally's mess. A weak flashlight finds the kid laid out in a tool room, Ma clutching him, Pearl cradling his head with that serene, otherworldly smile. Dave scoops the limp body and the whole sphere gives a slow, queasy lurch. "Where's the light?" he calls toward the pipe. Sally laughs high, defiant. Link pipes up, proud and breathless. He and Magruder levered the pipe out. The ooze is pouring in. No more doorway. No more bargaining. Duchane explodes. They haven't just trapped the posse out, they've trapped themselves in. Voices rise, insults fly. The sphere breathes and settles. Dave hauls the groaning outlaw back to Ma, tells her to work the wounds, and asks the only question that matters now. "Where's Eli?" Ma gestures vaguely into the dark depths of the ship. Somewhere down there, the madman with the dream has finally gotten his wish. All 8 souls nearly assembled. His boxers aboard. The world sealed off by living Tarhe's monstrosity, ready, willing, and maybe even able to move. Back with the others, Marlin found Duchane in full fury, cursing Magruder, Link, Sally, and even their ancestors. Marlin cut in, cool and steady. "What's the difference? At worst, we're only delayed a few hours." But Duchane barked back. "Delayed? We've sealed ourselves in." Marlin countered. The pipe still jutted outside, and the sheriff would likely shove it back in. Mad as hell, but still a way out. Magruder bristled, threatened violence, and in the dark, Duchane put him flat on the floor with a thud. "No weapons," Duchane reported. "Next time, I cave your teeth in." The detective slunk off into silence. Then light burst across the cavernous interior. For the first time they saw it clearly. Scaffolding tilting inside a half-finished metal sphere. Crates and boxes piled by the sealed entry hole. And above them, steel girders strung with bare work bulbs. Below, the shape of a ship's superstructure leaned at an angle, humming faintly with dynamo power. Eli Thornbolt appeared from the depths, commanding them to close the entrance. The group laughed whose outside had already sealed it into a bulging scar. Duchesne mocked with a sailor's tune, anchors aweigh. Then teased about Pearl's prophecy of 4 men, 4 women. Eli scoffed, beard bristling, though he muttered under his breath, "There should be 8. Where is that girl?" Marlin shifted focus. "If we rigged a periscope, push it through the ooze inside the pipe, we might see what's going on outside," Duchesne agreed. And together they explored the lower decks. They found stockpiles of food, crates of equipment, unfinished cabins, and in one broken box, a gleaming instrument. Eli, uncharacteristically buoyant, confirmed it. The periscope. Then he vanished again, muttering about his great work. Down in the control chamber, they confronted him. Coils, dynamos, and a hulking switchboard. Eli boasted of a power locked in magnetic coils, stress so violent it could polarize atoms and nullify gravity. Duchesne translated bluntly, anti-gravity. He even jabbed him with Professor Lamberton's critique that his theories were impossible. Eli exploded in rage, then, in a fit of pride, slammed the master switch. Nothing happened, just a faint hum. He explained it needed to build potential, then carefully release with a rheostat. If pushed too far, he warned, it could hurl them into space and crush them. At that very moment, the sphere lurched violently, pitching Eli against the level limit. No bones shattered, no flight only, a groaning shift of girders. Duchesne roared with laughter. Marlin grimly agreed. "Well, that settles that." Eli, shaken, sputtered excuses about faulty connections, then drove them away. Marlin and Duchesne went back to work. They fashioned a sheath of rolled iron for the periscope, welding its nose to a point, planning to push it out through the ooze, and drop the casing away. All night they labored, pausing only for a rough meal. The outlaw the Picaroon kid lay fevered in a bare stateroom, bleeding from 6 bullets. Sally reported with a crooked smile that Pearl had insisted on poultices made from the crater's ooze. Ma swore by it. Duchesne shrugged. "Medicinal clay exists. Maybe it works," Marlin joked darkly. "Bottle it and we'll make a fortune." By the time the others turned in, the periscope was installed. Through it they could just make out the crater rim and sky beyond. Duchesne grumbled. It was useless. One twist from the sheriff outside and the device was gone. Marlin agreed but kept silent. Better to give the crew something to cling to. Even Magruder and Link, shamed into effort, had helped unpack bedding and set up makeshift quarters. Exhausted, the strange company finally slept. Marlin dropped into his blanket roll, lulled by the faint hum of dynamos and the creak of girders, knowing he lay sealed inside a colossal sphere of metal and ooze. A tomb or a vessel, with a mad genius at its heart and a prophecy hanging over them all. Dave Marlin woke with terror gripping his chest. For a few choking seconds, he thought the whole monstrous sphere was collapsing in on him, pressing the air from his lungs, crushing him flat against the cold floor. He couldn't move, couldn't even breathe, and nausea rose in his throat like a tide. At last, the spell broke. Gasping, shaking, he forced himself upright, though the sensation of smothering weight clung to him long after. From the adjoining cubicle came the low moans of the outlaw they dragged in the night before. Marlin stumbled over, his muscles stiff and sore. Ma Barstow, snoring heavily, had planted herself like a watchdog across the doorway. He stepped over her bulk and knelt by the wounded figure. There was a pan of water and a rag. Gently he moistened cracked lips, wiped the sweat-streaked face. The poultice Ma had plastered around the outlaw's neck wound was oozing its muddy slime. Marlin peeled it back, checking the bandages on chest and side. And then he froze. The frame beneath his hands was too slender, too soft. The face, despite its pain, looked boyish, delicate. Pulling down the blanket to be sure, he saw the truth. The outlaw wasn't a man at all, but a girl, shot and bleeding, dressed in men's clothes to hide her secret. A chill went through him. Carefully, almost tenderly, he tucked the blanket back around her body. When he turned, Pearl was there in the doorway. Her pale hair glowed in the dim light, her lips curved in that strange, enigmatic smile. Her vacant eyes gave nothing away, yet the sight of her in that moment made Marlin's skin crawl. He touched her arm softly. "Better get back to bed. Girl, oh girl, maybe you've got something after all." Hours later, Hands shook him awake, again rough this time. Bart Duchin loomed above him, eyes blazing with excitement. "Wake up, Dave. For God's sake, wake up, you've got to see this." Still groggy, Marlon stumbled after him to the scaffold and the jury-rigged periscope. Duchesne looked first, then pulled back. Pale. Marlon bent to the eyepiece. At first it didn't register, then his throat went dry. There was no crater, no hillside, no earth at all. Only the endless void of space. Stars glittered against blackness, sharp and cruel. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. "There's nothing out there, nothing but stars. We're in space." A memory surged, waking at midnight with that crushing weight on his chest. It hadn't been a dream, it had been acceleration. They had launched. Together, he and Duchesne stormed into the control room. Thornbolt was sprawled across his pallet, snoring, beard rising and falling with each breath. They shook him awake. Furious, Duchesne's anger boiled over. "What right did you have to do this? How the hell do you plan to steer it, to land it, to get us back? That damned periscope is as useful as a match in a snowstorm." The bearded inventor blinked at them in confusion. Suspicion flickered, then triumph. "Go away with your jokes," he growled. But when they dragged him to the periscope, the truth hit him too. He rushed back to his instruments, muttering wildly. The gauges, the coils, the power banks, it all added up. Against every critic, against Lamberton's scorn, against the financiers who had abandoned him. Eli Thornbolt had done it. He had thrown them into space. His triumph was manic, almost unhinged. Now Lamberton will eat dust. Yes, it took longer to build the potential, but now it works. Duchesne, more sober, suggested the thick mud coating around the ship had acted like a battery, storing power until the impossible became possible. Eli rejected it, then faltered. Maybe the outer crust had amplified the current. Then his mood flipped again. He snarled at them to leave him to his great responsibilities. By then the rest of the group had gathered, drawn by the shouting. Link squinted through his greasy hair. "What's up?" Marlon's voice was grim. "Final. We may as well face it straight. We're not on Earth anymore. We're in space." The words hung in the air. Sally stiffened. Magruder muttered something foul. Ma clutched Pearl closer, while the girl only smiled, serene as a saint, as if this was what she'd seen all along. The revelation that they were no longer on Earth might have driven ordinary people into hysteria. But Eli Thornbolt's strange crew was no ordinary gathering. They were criminals, outcasts, and cynics hardened to blows of fate. Magruder turned pale, muttered a shaken geez, and collapsed onto a box. The others showed little more than bafflement. Sally Camino cut through the silence with her sharp voice. "So what? Where are we going? And how do we get back? Whose bright idea was this?" Marlon explained it as calmly as he could. Eli had left the force field humming, and when he stumbled against the starting lever in the night, the accumulated energy had finally done its work, shoving the massive sphere free of the Earth. They were adrift now, a bubble in the void. Slinky Link snickered that the sheriff and his deputies must have had the fright of their lives when the mudball suddenly vanished into the sky. No one laughed. Marlon reminded them soberly. There was no steering wheel, no compass, no real way of guiding this monstrous craft. Just a flimsy periscope and an endless ocean of black. "We're a mote of dust in space," he said. Ma Barstow, ever devoted to Pearl, cackled that the girl had foretold it. "Pearlie never makes a mistake." Duche mocked her, pointing out Pearl's prophecy of 4 men and 4 women. The count didn't add up. Ma only chuckled, certain the girl's visions were deeper than they could understand. And then, for the first time, Pearl spoke. Her voice was soft, distant, almost unearthly. "There are so many stones. The world is a stone. There are many stones. So many lonely stones." Her words sent a chill racing up Marlon's spine. The others stared at her, half in awe, half in unease. Ma swore the words meant something, even if none of them could yet decipher it. Then Thornbolt stormed in, furious to find them loitering near his sacred bank of coils. He sneered at them, his pioneer crew, not scientists or statesmen, but thieves, killers, and cast-offs. He drove them out, leaving behind only the echo of his contempt. Duchesne muttered bitterly that without the despised crew, Eli wouldn't even know his craft had left the ground. Marlin's mind turned with questions. Why did gravity feel almost normal inside, when they should be weightless? Duchesne guessed the repulsion plates might balance each other, one surface pushing, the opposite pulling. It was a thin explanation, but it was all they had. Bigger questions gnawed at him. Which way were they headed? Toward the sun, or away into the frozen dark? Would they crash into some wandering stone, as Pearl had said, or drift forever, powerless to change course? Days blurred into routine. With no sunrise or sunset to mark time, they invented their own 24-hour cycle. They ate, they slept, they waited. At first they demanded Thornbolt do something, but every plea brought only rages and curses. Soon they realized the truth. He was as lost as they were. The periscope gave little comfort at most, a dim hint of stars and shadow. Marlin argued that since their launch began at night, they must be moving away from the sun. Duchesne grimly agreed. If true, they wouldn't burn, but freeze, once the sphere drifted too far for warmth to reach. We'll starve first, Marlin muttered. At first the stores had seemed endless crates of canned goods, sacks of supplies. But when they measured carefully, rationing it out, the truth was bleak. At best, 5 months of food, perhaps a little more water. Eli had planned ahead with air purifiers, incinerators, settling tanks, but no machine could feed them forever. Duchesne, with his usual bite of sarcasm, pointed out the irony. We'll die of hunger before thirst. Unless, of course, the goo outside turns out to be edible. It already acts as a battery, a heat sponge, even a medicine. And don't forget it eats waste. Remember those birds and animals it swallowed in the pit? Sometimes I feel as if he cut himself off, his expression uneasy. Marlin studied him, unsettled, as if what? Duchesne shook his head. Nothing. I couldn't put it into words if I tried. And so the days stretched on adrift in space, sealed in a coffin of metal and clay, with dwindling food, gnawing questions, and a prophecy hanging over them. For a time, all eyes turned to the outlaw. By now everyone knew the truth. The wiry fugitive they had dragged inside was no man at all but a girl. Her name was Norma Hegstrom. She spoke little, kept apart from the women, and watched the men with quiet suspicion. Piece by piece, Duchesne pried out her story. She had run from some institution back east, a reformatory. Maybe Anne disguised herself as a boy to avoid capture. To survive, she had played the part too well, acting tougher and meaner than the roughest of the roughnecks around her, until at last she became the very outlaw she was pretending to be. Duchesne, restless and philosophical, sat one day with Marlin and Sally under the periscope, and voiced the bitter thought that haunted him. Maybe Earth just spewed us out. We're the kind society calls unfit, nobody back there to miss us. No lives that will change if we never return. Criminals, cast-offs, nuisances, a cargo of the unwanted, drifting in space. Sally snapped at him, but Marlin caught the weight of his words. It was the kind of truth a man didn't want to hear. Then Duchesne showed them something worse. He handed Marlin a jagged disc of metal. The fragment Slinky had burned loose with the blowtorch when they first cut into the sphere. The edges were corroded, eaten away. Marlin tilted it, and in the swinging light he saw tiny pinholes eaten clean through. Sally snapped at him, but Marlin caught the weight of his words. It was the kind of truth a man didn't want to hear. Then Duchesne showed them something worse. He handed Marlin a jagged disc of metal, the fragment Slinky had burned loose with the blowtorch when they first cut into the sphere. The edges were corroded, eaten away. Marlin tilted it, and in the swinging light he saw tiny pinholes eaten clean through. He accused Marlin and the others of plotting to save themselves, leaving the rest to rot. Duchesne laughed coldly. If it comforts you, there will be no escape for any of us. The shell is being digested. Eventually it'll eat us too. Link's ferret eyes gleamed with panic, but no one had answers. Magruder and Link finally dared to confront Eli, but the old man had walled himself off in the control room, barking orders through Ma Barstow when he wanted food. When they pressed him, he ranted about being cheated on steel prices and dismissed their fears. To him, the ship was still his grand triumph, and their talk of decay was nonsense. Norma overheard, thin and pale, wrapped in one of Ma's robes. She spat bitterness. So you saved me from the law, patched me up, what for? To watch this thing rot around us. There was fire in her eyes, a spark that startled Marlon. He couldn't help noticing she was slowly becoming more feminine, her features softening as her hair grew back. But when Duchan's eyes followed her, hungry and appraising, Marlon's temper flared. Tension over women began to fester. Duchain, half mocking, half serious, declared he'd choose for himself Sally, Norma, whoever he wanted, regardless of Marlon's unspoken claims. Magruder, grinning crudely, chimed in that Pearl looked ripe for the taking, and Ma's watchfulness wouldn't stop him forever. Marlon's fury blazed, though he kept it contained. The others knew he carried the only weapon aboard, and that fact alone kept them cautious. But inside, Marlon knew what was happening. Rivalry, jealousy, covetous stares. These things would rip them apart faster than hunger or vacuum. Sally was sharp and desirable. Norma was tough but growing into her womanhood, and Pearl was innocence itself, serene and unearthly. The one he felt must be protected at any cost. The thought of Magruder's eyes on her sickened him like a crime against something sacred. From then on, Duchain openly baited him, flaunting his attentions towards Sally and Norma, daring Marlon to make a move. And Marlon, knowing he had no rightful claim, could only withdraw into silence. Brooding, morose, he pulled further from the group, his thoughts circling darker each day. The sphere kept drifting in endless black, its shell quietly eroding, while inside, tensions thickened, less suspicion, and rivalries gnawing as surely as the ooze outside. Among the strange crew, it was Slinky Link, the weasel-faced sneak, who cracked first. From the moment they discovered the sphere's shell was being eaten away by the ooze, fear gnawed at him. He skulked in corners, avoided the others, his eyes darting like a rat. Then one day he simply vanished. When he failed to show at meals, they searched and found him crouched behind crates in the storeroom. He bolted, shrieking like a madman, and disappeared into the maze of girders overhead. From then on, the beams became his kingdom. Hair long, shirt tattered, his sharp little face peered down from the shadows like some wild monkey. If anyone tried to approach, he screeched and clambered higher. In the end, hunger drove him down only at night. When he would snatch food Ma Barstow left out for him like a zookeeper feeding a caged animal. Marlon let him be. He had bigger puzzles in his mind. Night after night, he bent over the periscope, charting the slow spin of the vessel. The sphere had begun to rotate lazily, turning its two halves to the sun in succession, giving them short days of light and warmth. The ooze coating absorbed and spread the sun's heat evenly, sparing them from freezing or burning. But to Marlon's mind, the rotation raised more questions than it answered. Doubt ate at him until, one day, he wormed his way deep between the hull and the support girders. Close to the segmented plates Thornbolt had built as anti-gravity engines, he reached out, touched the underside of a plate, and felt something like a lump of hardened clay. When he let go, the lump snapped back to the plate as though pulled by a rubber cord. He tried again, same result. It hit him then. The plates weren't repelling, they were attracting. These weren't anti-gravity plates at all, they were gravity plates. Back on the scaffold, turning the discovery over in his mind, Marlon was joined by Sally, sharp-eyed, restless. She demanded to know what he was hiding. So he told her how Thornbolt's vaunted breakthrough had been nothing more than a freakish accident of physics. How the ooze coating had acted like a massive battery, storing up months of electrical energy, and then unleashing it in one titanic burst, enough to polarize the plates for only a moment. That single, impossible surge had hurled the sphere away from Earth like a cannonball into the void. The force lasted seconds, maybe less, but it was enough. Sally yawned, unimpressed. "We ought to christen the old ball," she teased. "Call it the Thornbolt." She left him on the scaffold, bored by his theories. Perhaps annoyed that he hadn't taken the bait, she dangled in her presence. But Marlon's mind spun on. The surge had flung them free, yet they hadn't been crushed by the acceleration. Why his answer? Because for that instant, they had been under the plate's repulsion, as well as their own momentum. Two forces had nearly canceled each other out. The crushing weight he'd felt that night had been only the slight imbalance, where the insulation let acceleration win for a moment. Now though, The plates had snapped back, their molecular tension reversed, and gravity held them steady inside. They weren't riding anti-gravity anymore, they were just coasting on momentum, in an endless, helpless trajectory through the void. He found himself talking more and more to Pearl. She would drift up silently, sit beside him on the platform, and listen with that vacant, saintly smile. He poured out his tangled thoughts to her, about the freakish accident that had hurled them into space, about whether the sphere itself might be alive, whether the Earth had spewed them out as part of some cosmic design. "Sometimes I think this little world was sent forth with a destiny of its own," he whispered. "What do you think, Pearl?" Her lips parted. "It could be true," she echoed. He smiled grimly. That was Pearl repeating words, parroting phrases, yet somehow giving them weight. It was foolish, he knew, but her calm presence gave him permission to dream out loud. How do we know trees, or rocks, or even this globe itself, don't have consciousness? How do we know? How do we know? She repeated, smiling as if she'd solved the riddle. Then, in the shadows of the girders above, Marlin glimpsed a pair of glinting eyes and a monkeyish face link, watching, listening. Marlin broke off abruptly, muttering darkly, "You're a bad influence. Pearl, you'll have me swinging on girders like him, before long." The discovery came, oddly enough, from Magruder, the one man least likely to notice anything beyond food or women. He had dragged his heavy frame up to the observation scaffold out of sheer boredom and pressed an eye to the periscope. A second later, his yell split the stillness of the sphere. "We're gonna hit the moon," he shrieked. The others came scrambling, alarm slicing through their monotony. Marlin climbed up fast, shoved him beside him, and barked, "What's the idea? We're not within a million miles of the moon." But when he bent to the eyepiece, the words caught in his throat. There, burning white against the blackness, hung a disc, round, gleaming, cold. To the eye, it looked every inch the Earth's moon except smaller, sharper, and in the wrong place entirely. His voice was tight when he spoke. "We're approaching a solar body of some sort. Not the moon, but something like it." His gaze flickered toward Pearl, though he could not have said why. Duchesne leaned in next, straightened, and spat out his verdict. 2-1, it means a crack-up. Unless Eli can steer this tubband, I'll bet my hide he can't. Still, they went to the inventor. Thornbolt, more ragged with each passing day, his beard wild and his eyes fever bright, bustled between periscope and control room, twisting levers, slamming switches, cursing in bursts of incoherence. To the crew, it was theater no more. Marlin muttered to Sally later that Eli's instruments had no more effect than scrap metal. Whatever power had hurled them into space had burned out its own wiring. Eli might rage and strut, but he was as helpless as the rest of them. The menace of the approaching body became, like everything else, another fact of their bleak existence. They ate, they slept, they rationed. Only Marlin kept vigil at the eyepiece, watching the bright orb swell slowly larger. It was during one of these watches that Pearl came climbing softly up the ladder. Marlin turned, startled. He had not expected her. She rarely sought anyone's company. "You'd better run along," he told her gruffly. "Folks don't like you talking with me." She tilted her head, bird-like, listening with that strange calm that unnerved him. "It is so lonely," she murmured. The words startled him more than the sight of the disc in space. "You lonely?" he asked. "Didn't think you felt that way." But she pressed her hand against the clay crust sealing their old entrance hole. Her eyes were intent, her voice insistent. "So lonely. Please let it out." Something in her tone compelled him. He took a crowbar and cracked the hardened crust, prying away a piece. The soft gum beneath oozed free, and Pearl bent over it almost reverently, plunging her small hands into the sticky mass. She worked them through the slime as if caressing something unseen. Then she drew back, cupping her palms. In them lay a lump, clotted with mire. She brushed it clean, and Marlin caught his breath. It was the limp body of a field mouse, sealed in the shell and preserved. "Best throw it in the incinerator," he urged quietly. "It's dead, filthy." But she shrank from his hand, clutching the tiny corpse to her chest, like a mother with a child, and slipped away down the ladder. When Marlin joined the others for their meager rations, he found her still holding it, her face radiant Madonna-like, as she cradled the dead thing. Ma bristled when Duchesne demanded to know where she had gotten it. Let her be, she snapped. What harm's it doing? Duchesne only sniffed. Wait till tomorrow. If there's any stink worse than a ripe rodent, I'd hate to meet it. But the next day Pearl appeared at the table smiling, crumbs in her hand, and the mouse, alive again, sat up on its hind legs, nibbling daintily. The crew froze. Even Magruder stopped chewing. The impossible had happened. Pearl's pet was alive. Now it gets uncanny, Duchesne muttered. The shell digests anything dead we throw away, scraps, bodies of birds. But here's proof it knows the difference. It doesn't destroy the living, yet preserves them, holds them, maybe in some kind of sleep. Suspended animation. Sally scoffed. You talk as if the ship were alive. Marlin's voice was steady, but his eyes burned. Not alive maybe, but something close. Think of it, chemicals that consume dead matter, yet leave living cells untouched. Water does the same. Put a dead leaf in damp soil, it rots. A live root in the same soil thrives. The table fell into uneasy silence. It was Magruder who broke it, his piggish eyes gleaming. He glanced from the shell to his plate of thin rations. There must be a mess of critters out there. Birds, chipmunks, maybe worse. Wouldn't mind some fresh meat, even if it's just a squirrel. No one laughed. The thought lay there on the table with the crumbs and the fear, foul and tempting all at once. Marlin didn't say it aloud, but the idea gnawed at him. If the canned food ran out, if their 5 months of rations dwindled, maybe the shell itself, horrible, miraculous, was the only pantry they had left. For weeks, the sphere had drifted as if standing still. No jarring crashes, no sense of speed. At times, a faint shudder ran through the hull, likely meteors, glancing off the thick clay insulation, but never anything worse. Then the periscope began to tell a different story. The moon they'd first spotted grew larger. Details sharpened, crags, shadows, the pocked scars of a rocky surface. Marlin watched closely, until one day he realized something more disturbing. They weren't headed straight into it, they were circling it. In fact, they'd slipped into an orbit. And before long, other bodies appeared. A second rocky world, then a third. By the time he broke the news over rations, he already knew. We're in the asteroid belt, he said flatly. Duchesne understood at once, explaining to the others how they must be somewhere beyond Mars, among the shattered remnants of a planetor, one that never fully formed. Hundreds had been charted, he said, but thousands more roamed unmarked. Magruder blanched. What's the chance we don't get smashed? Marlin only shrugged. None. We've never had control. We're passengers. Nothing more. It was Pearl who murmured her eerie confirmation. So many stones. Lonely stones. Suddenly Duchesne leaped up. She knew. She told us before, stones. Asteroids. Ma beamed as if her golden-haired child had proved a prophetess. Norma, pale and fierce, broke her silence with a bitter outburst. She said she could feel it in her bones that the sphere wasn't carrying them, but using them, like grubs trapped inside. It would crush them in time. They were meaningless to it. The others stared, uneasy. Days bled together. Marlin sat longest at the periscope. What he saw was breathtaking and terrifying. The sphere seemed to be the center of its own system, sweeping through space and gathering more and more companions. Sometimes he counted 18 planetoids circling with them, great and small, some icy, some jagged rock. The sphere's plates, he reasoned, were exerting an artificial gravity strong enough to tug drifting worlds out of their paths. They were snowballing a whole miniature solar system, and they were at the heart of it. The danger was plain. Already he'd watched 2 planetoids collide, grinding each other to fragments. Once a mountain of rock and ice passed so close he could see glittering cliffs and glaciers. He imagined it as an iceberg in space, frozen gases solidified in the killing cold. He recalled half-forgotten tales of giant ice blocks falling to Earth centuries ago. Perhaps, he thought, those legends were true. Perhaps such visitors came from belts like this. Now dust clouds sometimes veiled his view, fine grains born from cosmic collisions, slowly sinking toward the sphere's pull. Sometimes it was sleet, instead shards of ice drifting like frozen rain. He shuddered at the vision his mind built. These rocks grinding together, spiraling tighter, until one day they fused into a single monstrous world, and the little sphere was crushed at its core. Norma joined him once on the platform. She asked what he saw, and he offered her the eyepiece. For a long moment she stared, then pulled away shivering. "Tell me straight. They're drawing closer, aren't they?" He tried to soften it, joked about dust covering the periscope, but she pressed harder. At last he admitted, "Yes, it looks like the end. But it looked like the end the night we left Earth, and somehow we're still here." Her voice shook with rage. "It is a little world. I felt it when I lay half dead. I knew what you all were doing, like maggots crawling inside me. It has a purpose, and we're nothing to it. Why did you drag me back to life? Better to have died in a fight. At least then I'd have had a choice. Here were rats in a trap." She turned away, lips tight, leaving Marlon shaken. He found himself preferring Pearl's company, the blank, serene girl who never fought, never raged. Talking to her was like talking to some calm spirit who understood. And so he did. One day, stirred by Norma's outburst, he put the thought to words. Maybe the world itself, Earth, this sphere, all planets, was alive in some sense, guiding life across its surface, pushing mankind to explore, to fight, to change. Maybe wars, persecutions, wanderlusts were all just natural forces, shaping evolution. And maybe that same force had drawn all of them criminals, misfits, outcasts into Thornbolt's sphere for some greater purpose. He poured out his theory, half mocking, half believing, watching Pearl's placid face. At the end he asked her, "Accident or purpose?" Her lips curved into that innocent smile. "Or purpose," she echoed. And though Marlon laughed, a cold weight coiled in his chest. For in her vacant eyes, there was no doubt. Marlon would always regret that he hadn't tried harder with Norma. He might have spoken to her, tried to share his own stoic sense of fatalism, anything to give her a reason to keep going. But by the time regret came, it was far too late. They found her stretched out on her pallet, eyes wide and staring at nothing. Norma Hegstrom, the outlaw girl they had saved and nursed back from death's door, had taken her final way out. Death had traveled with them since the beginning. But this was the first time it stepped into their circle and claimed one of their own. The others gathered silently around her. Ma Barstow wailed. Sally wept bitterly. Magruder looked rattled, mumbling about seeing her near the medicine cabinet. Duchesne, usually glib, stood mute. Only Pearl remained untouched, her innocent, unreadable face staring down at the body without emotion. The survivors debated what to do. Burial in space meant sliding her body through the waste locks into the clay shell, a grotesque thought. In the end, cremation seemed the only way. Ma objected, but had nothing better to offer. Duchesne, with uncharacteristic gravity, took the blanket-trapped body himself, carrying her in silence toward the incinerator. And that was when fate struck. The sphere was hammered by a titanic blow. Marlon was hurled down the ramp, stunned, ears ringing with screams, and the metallic groan of girders wrenching apart. In the chaos, Sally clung to him, sobbing. He shook her off. There was no time for panic, and fought toward the storeroom for flashlights. The beams revealed horror. The scaffolding above had collapsed, and from a great rupture in the hull, the living ooze of the shell poured in like a tide. And in that tide was Slinky Link, trapped mid-scream, his weasel face twisted in terror as the stuff engulfed him. Marlon tried to reach him, but it was too late. The ooze swallowed him whole, cutting off his shrieks in a single sickening gulp. Sally retched violently beside him. Magruder and Duchesne stumbled into the light, dazed. Ma lay groaning with a welt on her brow, her head cradled in Pearl's lap, while the golden-haired girl smoothed her brow with eerie calm. Eli Thornbolt was found in the control room, neck broken where the shock had thrown him between two banks of coils. The grim truth dawned quickly. The asteroid had struck hard, tearing open the shell. The ooze that once protected them was now seeping through cracks everywhere, alive and insatiable, creeping inward like a predator. Link had been unlucky enough to be caught first, but he would not be the last. Even Norma's body, torn from Duchesne's arms during the impact, had likely been consumed the same way. The survivors gathered in bleak silence, the weight of reality crushing them. The illusion of destiny, of protection, of some higher purpose had been shattered. Death could strike them as easily here as anywhere else, maybe easier. The clay skin of the ship, once their shield, had become a monster. Weary and shaken, the men found the liquor they had hoarded for emergencies. They drank in silence, each staring into the dark with his own private despair, then stumbled off to their bunks, leaving the wreckage, the ooze, and the memory of their dead to haunt them through the silence of space. Marlin woke in the dark with a smothering weight on his chest, a feeling of doom pressing down on him. The vessel groaned and creaked around him like an old ship straining in a storm. Fumbling for his flashlight, he checked the bunks. Ma was snoring heavily, Sally was pale and restless in uneasy sleep, but Pearl's palate was empty. A sharp pang of dread hit him. Pearl, innocent, trusting, almost childlike, was the one most defenseless of them all. He searched every compartment, the storerooms, the control room, the aisles of the quivering superstructure. Nothing. His fear grew cold and tight inside his chest. He remembered Link swallowed alive, remembered Norma's body dragged into oblivion. Then his flashlight beam cut across a narrow crevice between the curved hull and the end wall of the sleeping quarters. And there, cornered in that cramped space, was Pearl, clutched in McGruder's filthy arms. The ex-detective spun, eyes flashing like a rat caught in a trap. "Get out. This don't concern you." But Marlin's voice came low and deadly. "Take your hands off her. I've got the gun and I've been waiting for a reason to use it." McGruder only sneered and dragged Pearl tighter against him, daring Marlin to shoot. What followed was a raw, brutal struggle in the shifting shadows of the hull. The vessel lurched violently, the walls themselves flexing and crushing Marlin against steel. Pain ripped through his body, but then his flashlight revealed the real horror. Behind Magruder, the hull had split wide open. From that jagged seam poured the living ooze, a gray, hungry tide pushing in like lava. Magruder knocked off balance, slipped, then in sheer panic did the unthinkable. He shoved Pearl into the surge, using her body as leverage to free himself. For one bewildered moment she struggled, and then the clay swallowed her whole. Something inside Marlin snapped. He lunged, not for his gun, not for safety, but for McGruder's throat. His hands clamped like claws, squeezing the life from the man who had sacrificed Pearl. McGruder shrieked, tried to plead, but the words died as Marlin bore him down. The ooze swept over them both, devouring, smothering. Marlin barely knew it. He was blind with red fury, strangling the man he hated more than any enemy on earth, until the tide of clay closed over them and the light went out. And then silence gave way to something stranger. A voice, soft and otherworldly, drifted across the void. A mother telling her child of gods and goddesses. Of Pyrrole, whose beauty was too dazzling for mortal eyes. Of Sahaloli, goddess of constancy, wounded into love by the Smith Lord's lightning. Of Elegi, who hurled thunderbolts into the void and forged worlds from nothing. A myth from forgotten ages, or a prophecy written into the very fabric of space. As Marlin sank into darkness, the tale of divine creation merged with the thunder of collapsing steel, as if the lives of men were but fragments hurled across eternity, caught between gods, fate, and the hunger of a living world. Dave Marlin's rebirth began at the edge of a gray, unfriendly sea. He came back into existence as if the planet itself had coughed him up from a lump of clay. At first he wasn't even conscious of being a man. He was simply a creature stumbling along a barren shore, gnawed by hunger, drinking brackish water, devouring grubs and roots just to survive. Slowly, painfully, his body remembered how to be human again, while his mind lagged far behind. The land was bleak. Sheer cliffs hemmed in the shoreline. The copper sun gave little warmth, and 2 erratic moons made the tides unpredictable and cruel. Yet life was there. Insects, squirrels, birds, even struggling tufts of grass. Instinct drove Marlin inland, and hunger kept him alive. He tore warm flesh from a squirrel, chewed bitter roots, and learned to sleep where he fell. Past the great journey through space, the clay sphere, his companions came back only in broken flashes. Then, one day, he saw smoke. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant people, with a desperate hope that stirred old memories. He climbed toward it and found a crude valley settlement, a tethered cow, straggling corn, a cave with a woman suckling a child. When he stumbled closer, the woman screamed, and a ragged man rushed out with a crooked stick. Recognition jolted through him. The shaggy weasel-eyed figure was Slinky Link, and the scarred woman Ma Barstow. Survivors, like him. They offered him warmth at the fire and a scrap of food, though grudgingly. Ma guarded her infant and milk like a wild animal. Link, obsessed with his cow and scraps of corn, treated survival as his entire religion. They were alive, yes, but diminished more animal than human. By morning, their suspicion had hardened. Link shoved him away with a stick. You eat too much. This is our place. You go. Naked, shamed, and hungry, Marlin trudged off into the wilderness again. Yet his mind was healing. He began making toolstone spears, crude knives, fire-starting kits. He stitched skins into clothing and cooked his meat. Day by day, his body grew stronger, and his brain relearned thought. At night, staring at the copper sun and twin moons, he remembered the clay sphere and wondered, was this bleak place their tomb, or their second chance? The answer came when he met Duchesne. The old con man was alive, two-bearded, skin-clad, grinning like a survivor who'd beaten the odds. Nearly caught up with you last night, he said casually, as though they hadn't both been swallowed by living clay and hurled across the void. Guess we're the last ones left. Together they pieced together the truth. Duchesne led Marlin to a sheltered cove, where lumps of hardened clay lay scattered along the tide line. He broke one open, soaked it in water, and showed Marlin what drifted free. Insects twitching back to life. Seeds, even a bedraggled bird that began to stir after hours in the sun. That's how it all came about, Duchesne said. The animals, the plants, even us. Everything that was trapped in that sphere got packed into these clay cocoons. The tides wash them out, one by one, and the planet populates itself again. Marlin stared in awe. A whole world born from a shattered mud shell, seeded with the life they once carried through the stars. How long? He asked. How long did we lie there, waiting? Duchesne only shrugged. Terribly long. Maybe while mankind lived out its whole history on Earth. Billions born and died, while we lay in chrysalis. Planets aren't made in a day. Maybe this whole rock was gathered from the fragments of the asteroid belt shaped into a new Earth. The idea staggered Marlin. He looked at the bleak cliffs, the twisted bushes, the copper sun that gave stingy warmth. And for the first time, he saw it not just as a wasteland, but as the first breath of a world being born. Along the bleak shoreline of this new half-born world, Marlin and Duchesne hunted together, surviving better as a pair than either had managed alone. But Marlin harbored a secret, an enormous lump of the life-bearing clay he had discovered near the tide line. He dug a channel so the sea could lap against it, hoping it might free something more than insects and vermin. Perhaps an animal. Perhaps even a human. Day after day he lingered by the pool, watching the clay soften, straining to see shapes stir inside. At last, beneath the murky water, a pale outline emerged. A human form, female. He dared not interfere, remembering how forcing the process often killed the life inside. Instead, he prepared himself like a man awaiting destiny, scraping his beard, hacking his hair short, reclaiming a measure of civilization. At dawn, the clay skin split and a body floated free. Marlin plunged in, dragged it to shore, wrapped it in furs. The face that stared back at him nearly stopped his heart. Norma, the outlaw girl who had died before the crash. She should have been gone forever. Yet here she was, preserved by the clay, her skin cold but intact. Could the same substance that had transformed and sustained him also have purged the poison of death from her body? Desperately, Marlin worked. He breathed into her lungs, pressed her chest, whispered encouragement. For agonizing minutes, she lay still, and then, at last, a shudder, a flicker of breath, the faintest opening of her eyes. Norma lived. He was still bent over her when Duchesne appeared above the rocks, watching with a cruel smile. So this is why you cleaned yourself up, he sneered. The tension was instant, electric. Both men knew the truth. The girl meant survival, companionship, hope, and each claimed her. Marlin stood his ground. She's mine. I found her. I brought her back. Duchesne's eyes hardened. One of us keeps her. The other doesn't. The words erupted into violence. Fists and spears clashed on the wet stone. They grappled like animals, choking, slamming each other against the cliff face, until Marlin, bleeding from a spear wound, staggered back. Duchin pressed the attack, the stone spear aimed for the kill. Marlin fought on, reckless, driven by fury and a desperate need to protect the fragile life he had revived. The two men tumbled down the slope, Marlin crushed beneath the weight of his enemy. Dizzy, gasping, blood pouring from his side, he looked up through failing vision. Duchin stood over him, spear raised high, then paused. "I don't want to kill you, Dave," he rasped. "Go your way, leave us in peace." Marlin, broken, yet unyielding, Norma caught between two primal forces, and the fragile future of their new world balanced on the edge of a blood-stained spear. Marlin woke, battered and broken, but alive. Duchain stood over him with Norma, the girl Marlin had dragged back from death itself. Duchain's words were almost kind, but the truth was plain. Marlin had lost. Norma's eyes followed Duchain now, her loyalty shifting with a quiet intensity. She hunted at his side, learned his ways, and left Marlin an outsider in the camp he had once built. When his ankle healed enough to carry him, Marlin packed up his meager tools and walked away without bitterness. "I'll keep in touch," he told them. But the wilderness felt better than watching another man take what his own heart had longed for. For weeks, Marlin lived by his spears along the lonely coast. Then one day he found a crude iron-tipped weapon, something no hand but a human's could have made. His discovery was swiftly overshadowed by the sound of screams on the wind. He crested a ridge and saw it. A woman clawing, biting, fighting off a man who had just struck her down. In the instant before the struggle ended, Marlin recognized them both. Sally, fierce, furious, battered but alive, and Magruder, the pig-eyed brute, still meaner than ever. The reunion was raw and awkward. Sally touched Marlin's face as if to convince herself he was real. Magruder snarled and shoved her away, growling about brats. Two naked children tumbled in the dirt near their cave home, a savage, hard life carved from scraps of survival. That night, after a bitter quarrel and bruises exchanged between Sally and Magruder, Marlin lay apart under the stars. But in the dark, Sally crept to him, sobbing, trembling, her arms around his neck. She poured out her misery, her years with the brute, the beatings, the despair. Then she kissed him, soft and desperate, and begged him to take her away. Marlin listened, his heart surging with hunger for companionship, for purpose, for love. She had children, yes, but that didn't repel him. In fact, it stirred something deeper, the need to protect, to provide, to build a life worth living in this savage new world. Her plan was simple. He would leave at dawn, Magruder would go hunting, and then Marlin could return and steal her and the children away. It was clever, safe, but as Marlin lay awake, the thought gnawed at him. Why sneak like thieves in the night? Why not face Magruder openly, man to man? Why not fight for her, prove himself worthy, and take her by the oldest right known to humanity? Yet when he thought of the children, of Sally's tearful eyes, and of Magruder's snarling fists, he wavered. Stealth or force, guilt or pride their way, he knew he was on the edge of a choice that would change all of their lives. And in that wilderness night, with Sally's kisses still warm on his lips, Dave Marlin felt both the thrill of hope and the weight of sin pressing down upon him. Marlin woke, battered, aching, but alive. Duchain loomed over him with Norma, the girl Marlin himself had dragged back from death. Duchain's words carried a shade of pity, but the truth was sharp as steel. Marlin had lost. Norma's eyes, once shadowed with doubt, now glowed with a steady light every time they followed Duchain. She had chosen. She hunted with him, moved with him, breathed with him, and Marlin was left a stranger at the fire he had once tended. When his ankle grew strong enough to carry him, Marlin gathered his few tools and weapons. He offered no reproach, no plea, only a dry farewell. "I'll keep in touch." But in truth, he knew the wilderness was kinder than watching another man hold the woman he had longed for. So he walked away. Weeks passed in solitude, his life marked by spears, hunger, and the gray stretch of the alien sea. Then, one day, he stumbled across a weapon, an iron spearhead, crudely hammered, yet unmistakably forged by human hands. Proof that others had survived. Proof that the world still held strangers. The sound of a woman's scream tore through the wind. Marlin climbed the ridge and froze. A brutal fight was unfolding below. A man had struck a woman down, but she rose, clawing, biting, screaming with feral fury. In a single glance, recognition struck him like a blow. Sally fierce, scarred, alive, and Magruder the pig-eyed brute, meaner than ever. The reunion was jagged and raw. Sally reached for Marlon's face as if touching a ghost. Magruder snarled, shoved her away, and muttered about brats. Two half-naked children played in the dirt outside, their crude, cavernous lives carved from hardship. That night, as Magruder and Sally fought with fists and curses, Marlon kept his silence. When the fire died low, Sally came to him in the dark. She was trembling, sobbing, her arms clinging to his neck. She poured out her years of torment, beatings, misery, despair, then kissed him with a desperate hunger. She begged him to take her away. Marlon listened, and something old and aching inside him stirred. Not just desire, purpose, a woman, children, a chance to build something that mattered in this savage world. He didn't care that the children weren't his blood. They could be his to protect, his to fight for. Her plan was simple. He would leave at dawn. Magruder would think him gone and go hunting. Then Marlon could return, steal Sally and the children, and slip away into freedom. It was clever. It was safe. But as Marlon lay awake, staring at the alien stars, the thought gnawed at him. Why sneak like a thief? Why not face Magruder like a man, claim Sally openly, win her by right of strength? That was the old way, the true way. Yet the faces of the children haunted him. Sally's desperate tears burned in his mind. To fight was pride, to sneak was survival. Either choice would shape all their lives forever. And so Dave Marlon lay in the wilderness night, Sally's kiss still on his lips, caught between hope and damnation, feeling the weight of love, sin, and destiny pressing down upon him. And so, from the moment they were hurled into the void inside that clay-covered sphere, to the bitter struggles for survival on a strange new world, the fate of Marlon, Sally Duchesne, Norma, and even the treacherous Magruder became something far larger than a tale of shipwreck. It became a story of human instinct, love, betrayal, hope, and the relentless will to live, even when the universe itself seemed set against them. But what do you think? Was their journey destiny, guided by some higher design? Or was it nothing more than cruel chance, a random chain of accidents in the cold dark of space? But what do you think? Was their journey destiny, guided by some higher design? Or was it nothing more than cruel chance, a random chain of accidents in the cold dark of space? Because sometimes, the most incredible tales are the ones we almost forgot to tell.